Hello and good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be back here at the UN, and thank you for joining us. We obviously have a very important UN Security Council meeting on the Middle East, and I just wanted to make a few remarks, and then I think we'll have an opportunity for a few questions as well. First and foremost, we are all very much seized of the continuing situation and humanitarian suffering of innocent Palestinians in Gaza. And therefore, the United Kingdom is now clear that we need an immediate humanitarian pause leading to a sustainable ceasefire in Gaza. Last month, my friend and colleague, Lord Cameron, the Foreign Secretary, and I visited Al Arish near the Rafah crossing, where, amongst others, we met with the Egyptian Red Crescent Society staff who are working tirelessly to get life-saving aid into Gaza. And if I may say, I want to pay particular tribute to those incredible people, volunteers, who are playing and often putting their own lives at risk to deliver humanitarian support to the people in Gaza. The humanitarian crisis in Gaza, as we all recognize, is worsening daily. Suffering is frankly unacceptable, and our priority must be to alleviate it with immediate effect. For our part, the United Kingdom is working with partners to help build a plan to move from that humanitarian agreements that we see, allowing those pauses to become a sustainable, permanent ceasefire without a return to hostilities. What would this mean? Well, such a plan would require that Hamas agree to the release of all hostages. Secondly, that Hamas no longer be in charge of Gaza, and the threat from Hamas terror and rocket attacks would have to end. Equally important is that there would be an agreement in place for the Palestinian Authority to return to Gaza in an order to provide governance, services, and increasingly security. Equally important is that we now see a real commitment from all countries towards the delivery of the two-state solution. It is our view, and I know it's a view shared by many, that this conflict must not go on for a moment longer than necessary. An immediate pause is now necessary to get, as I've seen myself, the vital life-saving aid in and get the hostages out. I've met, along with Lord Cameron, some of the hostage families, and we know of their suffering. We've also met with Palestinian families who have left Gaza, and we know of their suffering. Peace remains the only way to end this human tragedy and suffering that has engulfed Israelis and Palestinians once and for all. Therefore, it is incumbent on all of us to work together to make that vision for peace a living reality. At the Security Council, we've seen, and the United Kingdom worked hard in achieving the support for the resolution, that we can achieve unity and purpose about what needs to happen and happen now. What needs to happen now to relieve the humanitarian crisis and to start working towards that sustainable, permanent ceasefire. So I'm here today in this important open debate as the United Kingdom's Minister of State, but also with the Minister of State for responsibility for the Middle East, to ensure that we once again underline our support for the vision turning into a reality of a two-state solution. And that will be the only way we will see lasting peace in the Middle East. Thank you so much. Sir. If I may, Talal Saab, please.
Thank you, Lord Ahmad. And my name is Talal Haj from Al Arabiya and Al Hadath Networks. With regard to Gaza, isn't it time for us to move away from counting trucks, which are, by all estimates, drops in the sea, to alleviate the suffering of the Palestinian people, to a real political process that stop the bombings, ensure a ceasefire, and stop the killing in Gaza of civilians, innocent civilians? And on the other hand, I would like to ask you on Yemen, how do you see the Red Sea saga developing. And the Houthis are continuing in their actions, which we can describe as terrorist action against international navigation and marine trade. But also it threatens to be a regional, expanding the regional war way beyond Palestine and Israel. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. First of all, the quick response to your first question is yes, we want to see that political process. And that is why the United Kingdom, along with other partners, the United States and indeed other key countries within the region, most importantly, are working to that end. You know, the human suffering, and I speak as a father, I speak as someone who knows the region extremely well. How can someone not be totally taken by the horrifying suffering we've seen? When I sit down and I see that suffering, when I read the reports, it's vital, and that should be impetus enough. And all of you have a very important role in your reporting, objectively, based on facts and evidence, to ensure the information is on there. And yes, hold all countries accountable to ensure we come together. I've always been clear, as has the Foreign Secretary, that we need to ensure every country that has whatever equity currently in play to allow that situation, that political discourse to return the peace and stability and security for Palestinians and Israelis alike, need to make that happen. That's why the important discussions on hostages is important. That's why recently when we visited the region, and I know the Foreign Secretary is visiting again this week, I will be returning to the region next week, is that we continue to press for the opening of Kerem Shalom with Israel to ensure the level of humanitarian support. And I agree, this shouldn't be, oh, isn't it great, we've got 5 more trucks in. This is about people's lives. Every single life matters. And yes, it may not happen overnight, but through our words and actions, if we can save the life of a single soul, it's worth it. On the issue of the Houthis specifically, yes, of course, and you would have seen the United Kingdom when we've taken part in the operations. This is one of the main world shipping lanes. About 15 to 20% of the world shipping goes through there. This has implications on prices in people's pockets, the price people pay. The Houthis have targeted quite specifically, and when the United Kingdom first joined the operation, they specifically targeted HMS Diamond. So we want to be very clear. We don't want to see any escalation. We don't want to see this conflict continuing. And I think the Houthis have it. There was some good progress being made with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to bring peace to Yemen. We want to see that track re-established, and they can end this right now. If I come to Edith, good to see you again.
Nice to see you. Thank you very much. Edith Lederer from the Associated Press. 2 questions following up. The Israelis have reportedly proposed a 2-month ceasefire during which all the hostages would be released and Palestinian prisoners would be released as well, with a few other caveats. What is the UK's reaction to that proposal? And also, the UN has confirmed that it's received a letter from the Houthis ordering all UK and US nationals working for the United Nations and NGOs to leave the areas they control in northern Yemen. What is the UK's response to that?
Well, first of all, on your first question, I think I have seen the press reporting on that, and I would go back to what the UK position is. When we saw that one pause that we did see some goodwill prevail. We did see hostages being released. We did see aid entering, and that's why we now call for that immediate humanitarian pause, because it means hostages can get out. And I pay tribute to those working. The state of Qatar, I know, are involved, along with Egypt, together with Israel on that point. But it will also mean that we see the alleviation of the suffering of the ordinary civilians, Palestinians, particularly when you see 70% of the women and children that have been caught up and killed in that particular conflict, it's important we also make sure that element delivers. On the second point, I'll be quite frank with you. I think the United Nations, for all its challenges it faces in the world, I defy anyone to say, is there an organization that brings together, as it's doing again today, on this important issue, nations of the world? We may have our challenges, we may have our contrarian views, we may have differences, but the UN does an incredible job on the ground, and it's done that in Yemen. So I'd say a simple message for the Houthis is, let people who often put their own lives at risk to get on with the job, to help alleviate suffering around the world. And if it's in Yemen or elsewhere, let people get on with the job. And on Gaza, that's why David Cameron, the Foreign Secretary, has also said, when we call for a sustainable ceasefire, that means not just trucks getting in, as we heard earlier. It's about ensuring those trucks are protected, the staff are protected, and to ensure they have the fuel and what's necessary in terms of logistics to allow them, as the UN does incredibly around the world, to do its job. Yes, please.
Thank you, Lord Ahmed. It's Pamela Falk from CBS News.
Good to see you again, Pamela.
Yes, nice to see you. A quick follow-up on Yemen. There have been, as far as I'm counting, 8 missions of the US, UK and US attacking sites in Yemen. Is there any sense that the message is getting through? And if not, including the letter that Edie talked about, is there a sense that this will continue? Thank you.
Well, I think as I said earlier, on the whole issue of Israel and Palestine, we need to look at who has what equity. And I think there are countries in the region, including the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, that have the ability and have demonstrated in recent months that peace with the Houthis is something that's a track that can be attained and achieved. The Houthis, as I said, can stop this today. And let's not forget, they themselves have launched over 26 attacks on commercial shipping, not on military shipping, on commercial shipping, but they have escalated that to include British ships. We want to see a de-escalation. We do not want to see that issue in any way being conflated with what we're dealing with, from those shocking attacks on the 7th of October to where we are today in Gaza. One thing is very clear for every Israeli and Palestinian: peace is the only course forward. Let's get focused on what needs to happen on the ground, and that's where the United Kingdom is working.
Sir, one more question, sir. One more question, sir.
Yeah.
The IRGC, Britain has called on nations to list the IRGC as a terror organization. Do you think it's appropriate for an IRGC card-carrying member to attend this meeting?
Well, the thing is, I'm sure there's governance rule for meetings. We've been very clear about the IRGC and its destabilizing influence, and that's why we have taken sanctions across the board when it comes to IRGC members and, of course, the IRGC organization as a whole. Thank you so much.